All right, stand by. 10 seconds to go.
Talent.
Ready, camera.
Three,
Cue talent.
2, 1.
Roll to record.
Can conservatives trust the media if only 7% of journalists are Republicans? I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. A regular study conducted by the University of Indiana School of Journalism found that 28% of reporters identify as Democrats, 7% as Republicans, 50% as independents, and 14% as other. Back in 2002, 18% of journalists identified as Republican, 35% as Democrats, and 32% as independents. The rise of independents mirrors changes in the electorate as a whole, but the collapse of Republicans in the media is an aberration, and it came in spite of the fact that Fox News rose to dominate the ratings over that same period of time. What happened, and what can we do about it? Will conservatives ever be able to get reporting they can trust when they aren't represented in the industry? To explore this question and much, much more, we're joined by PJTV contributor and author Scott Ott in Dallas, Texas, and here in Southern California, PJTV contributor and stand-up comic Stephen Kruiser. You know, Kruiser, when I was growing up here in Southern California, we used to subscribe to 3 papers, the LA Times, the Orange County Register, and then an even local city paper. We used to watch the local news on all the local channels. There was no Fox at the time. There was no CNN until really the Gulf War, CNN at least on our radar. And we consumed a lot of this. My dad now consumes the same amount of news that he did back then, but it's all Fox and talk radio. He is totally checked out. Is that something that's common right now among the conservatives that you know, that they look at these numbers and they look at the product that we're getting from the mainstream media and they just say, you know what, I'll find an alternative, I'll find something else?
Yeah, because what happened in the last several years, I mean, there's been this slow shift to the left in the media in general for well over half a century now. But what's happened in the last 15 to 20 years is the rise of op-ed journalism. There's no real journalism anymore. Most of these kids coming out of journalism school are writing op-ed pieces. They insert themselves into stories, which never used to happen. Remember, it always used to be this reporter. No one ever mentioned their own names or said I when they wrote something for a newspaper. Even when they were doing television things, with this reporter thinks. So now it's all this personal op-ed stuff, and people know right away that I've got this Democrat kid fresh out of college who's just been poisoned by them, who's giving me his 28-year-old opinion in the New York Times. Of course I'm not going to believe it. I'd much rather go watch something where I know I can trust them.
Is it now that just conservatives have changed, Scott, where conservatives are now calling them out, whereas before we used to be in on it with them and just pretend like it was straight journalism, even though in our heart of hearts we knew it wasn't, but now we're just vocal about it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more options for us now. I mean, you can choose many more sources of information, and so you don't have to put up with it. You don't have to listen to somebody who is painting on a patina of objectivity when you know that they're a barking leftist. And frankly, I think we'd all be better off if we dropped the charade. If we just said, hey, you know what? To be biased is to be human. So let's just be out there with our biases. You know what I believe, you know where my biases are, but you can still evaluate whether the story that I'm bringing you, if I'm bringing you a story and purporting to be a reporter, and tell you what happened somewhere or what somebody said, you should hold me to a standard of honesty there. But I could be the farthest right-wing guy ever and go and report on a Hillary Clinton press conference and still be at least honest and accurate about it.
You know, the big lie back in the day was, in the old days, before Fox News, you got straight reporting, you got straight journalism. Walter Cronkite was unimpeachable. Walter Cronkite was America's dad. And you go back and you look at Walter Cronkite, he's one of the biggest lefties on planet Earth.
Anti-war activist. Had to tell you how many people died in Vietnam that day at the end of every newscast. He was all, this shift has been going on since before I was born, and I'm not youthful. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, it started the floodgates open when Pierre Salinger left the Kennedy administration, then became an NBC sports reporter for a little while so that they could pretend nothing was going on. And then suddenly one day he's on NBC News. And that's what it really is, we always talk about the lobbyist revolving door in Washington. One of the biggest revolving doors in Washington is between the media and Democratic operatives. That's what happens. That still happens in the media.
Think about it. David Axelrod, now working for CNN. Gibbs, now working for MSNBC.
Stephanopoulos.
George Stephanopoulos, now the anchor
Yes.
for Good Morning America, which is supposed to be a non-political morning show for them.
Yes, and if you start digging deeper, it goes far beyond that. So this revolving door has been going on for a very long time, long before the advent of Fox News. When I hear the Fox News people, no, this has been a thing. Fox News was the counterbalance, the counter movement to that. The reason Fox News thrust into prominence so quickly wasn't because Roger Ailes is an evil genius. He was a genius for recognizing the need, but it was the people were already so sick of it. So much resentment had built up that, boom, shot him right to the top.
What's the remedy, Scott? Should conservatives who are going for journalism degrees start applying at ABC, NBC, CBS and try to change it from within? Or should we as conservatives just opt out altogether and just stay in our own bubble?
I think that depends on your giftedness and your inclination. I mean, I wouldn't want to tell somebody, whatever you do, don't work for a mainstream media organization. If you can work there and keep your integrity, do that. If you feel like you have to work for somebody who's overtly in your ideological camp, do that too. But, every day, and I'm sure you do the same thing, I read the New York Times, I read the Washington Post, I read the Wall Street Journal, and I read, I read Al Jazeera America. I read a variety of news sources, Reuters and the Associated Press and all that kind of stuff, but I don't swallow it whole. I don't just, go, oh, well, it says that, then it must be true. There's something called discernment that I think we're not doing a very good job teaching our children and our students to develop.
We're a country that's based on skepticism, and that's something that conservatives have in common with liberals. We're not skeptical of the same things, but we're skeptical of big institutions of government. You look at conservatives, we're skeptical of the IRS because we know that they prey on us and they pick on us and they want to punish us with that government agency. You talk to any liberal, they're skeptical of the cops. They think the cops are out there to pick on minorities.
Military.
Isn't that something that we should teach children, starting from when they're very young? Be skeptical of everything you read. Read everything, absorb everything, but don't buy it wholeheartedly. Use your noggin and figure out what's true and what's not.
I think that's one of the tectonic ideological shifts of the last several decades here, where you've got basically got the 60s radicals who were questioning authority. Everyone over 30 was awful, everything. And they are now in control of academic institutions and trying to get people to basically subscribe to the wonder that is government authority, except for the one part you said. Everything else, they're trying to make it seem like the government is the cure-all, the end-all. And these were the people who were violent anti-government skeptics in the 1960s. And I think that's a huge problem there right now. But where I see this going, I don't worry about it forever, because the media that still gets to the people who are less discerning, the big, we keep saying they're going to die out, the big news shows, they will eventually. The entire television landscape is devolving into a la carte stuff, pick and choose. We've got PJTV here for the people who want that. You're going to be able to start handpicking your news sources, which is what younger people do right now. A lot of these 20-somethings who are brainwashed, they're not watching the ABC Evening News or the NBC Evening News or the Today Show. Sooner or later, that will all go away, and we may not be more discerning, but we'll at least be able to just go pick out and we'll know where the biases are.
Here's what happens. Whenever the left is skeptical, and they're skeptical of the cops, they're asking the tough questions. They're using their critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
If we are skeptical about any claim that they're making about climate change or anything that the FBI, or not the FBI, the IRS director is saying, we're conspiracy theorists. That's how they paint us, right, Scott?
Well, yeah, and this isn't something new, by the way. I mean, when Thomas Jefferson was a Secretary of State, he was paying on the State Department payroll, I believe the guy's name was Philip Freneau, to write a newspaper that was attacking the Federalists. And so he was secretly just sort of feeding ideas to him. I actually prefer the sort of colonial and early revolutionary, post-revolutionary period of American journalism, because everybody wore their biases on their sleeve. You knew this was the Federalist paper, this was the Democratic Republican paper, and you knew where people stood. And I think if we're open about it, then we can have an honest debate. And I much prefer an interview. I'd love to sit down with Hillary Clinton, by the way, and do an interview, and it would be nothing like what Sean Hannity would do. I'm not trying to browbeat these people. What I want to do is allow Hillary Clinton to say what she genuinely believes, to talk about what she thinks she's accomplished and what she would like to do in this country. And I think that's journalism. And you can be a rightist or a leftist or right down the middle. It doesn't matter. You just have to be honest.
Agreed.
British newspapers are doing just fine being openly biased, by the way.
There you go, and they're tabloid, too.
They're tabloid, and they're thriving much better than American newspapers are.
All right, that's all the time we have for today, but now it's your turn. Why are there so few Republican journalists, and what can we do about it? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.